Hi everyone, my name is Subigya. Today I'm going to introduce our work on COVID student study. In this work, we compare and contrast behavior of students pre-COVID and during COVID using mobile phone sensing. This work is from a collaboration among computer scientists and behavioral psychologists from Dartmouth College. The work we're presenting today is based on an extension of our previous student life study. So the student life study tracked 48 undergrad students at Dartmouth College throughout a term. In this next iteration of the study, we follow 220 undergraduate students throughout their 4 years at Dartmouth College. So the overarching goal of this study is to track experiences of undergrad students throughout their academic tenure with a particular focus on mental health. As such, we ask students to self-report their mental health status such as anxiety, depression, self-esteem, social level, and stress every week. In this work, we focus on first year of COVID and a year prior to it. When COVID happened, we already had our study running for almost 2 years, so we added some extra bit of questions to ask, like COVID-related questions to ask to participants. These were optional questions and asked every week in the form of ecological momentary assessments. The analysis that follows includes 180 of the original 220 participants who answered the COVID question. Specific to mobile sensing, our sensing app collected a wide range of behavioral passive sensing data from the phone, from both the iOS and Android phones. So we compute features on a daily basis, and specifically we compute the features including physical activities, mobility, sleep patterns, and semantic location. We assign semantics to places where participants visit based on a third-party API. We also calculate smartphone usage and smartphone-based audio. We further break down different activities and behaviors based on whether they were performed at the participant's most significant place of stay, meaning their home. This allows us to model people's behaviors during COVID as they spent more time at their home. We label a significant location as home where a participant spends most of the time between 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. We also generate several regularity features. So as mentioned earlier, in this work, we use data from a year prior to COVID, that is data from February 2019 to March 2020, and compare that with the first year of COVID, which is data from March 2020 to February 2021. Here's an example of what the behavior change looks like. So the vertical line is March 13, 2020, when COVID was declared a national emergency in the US. The x-axis is the time period for both the figures. So in the first figure, we plot the time spent at study places within the campus. We can see that immediately following the national emergency announcement, there's a sudden decrease in time spent at study places. On the other hand, we can see that in the second figure, the duration of unlocks of the phone increases following March 13. We perform similar pre-post analysis with all the features that we collect. We sort of compare the median score of pre-COVID-19 year with the first COVID-19 year. The x-axis is the percentage change, whereas the y-axis contains the name of the features or behaviors, if you will. Some of the notable changes include an increase in number of audio plays, regularity of unlock duration at home, and increase in sleep duration by a small amount. As expected, we find a decrease in visits to unique location as well as walking duration. Note that all these results are statistically significant. Next, we look at whether all the participants react to the pandemic in the same manner. For this, we cluster participants first by their self-reported response to our surveys. We perform PCA to reduce the dimension of the feature sets we have, and then perform clustering on the principal components. The first figure is the result of performing clustering on the self-reports. Next, we run clustering on the behavioral change data. So we subtract the pre-COVID-19 year data from the first COVID-19 year data, and then cluster the resulting information. We use silhouette score to identify optimum number of clusters, which turns out to be 2. The tables we see are the result of clustering, first on self-reports and then on sensing data only. So from the self-reports, we see that students in cluster C2 are more concerning since they score high in mental health metrics. They have higher depression, anxiety, stress, lower self-esteem, and higher COVID concern. Note that COVID-1 is an additional question we asked during the pandemic, which simply tells students to report how concerned they are about COVID. In the second table, we can see that students have different changes in behavior during the pandemic. Since we subtract the pre-COVID year data from the first COVID year data, the negative symbol in the front means that that specific behavior reduced during the pandemic, whereas a positive number indicates that the associated behavior increased during the pandemic. We can see that while some students had an increase in certain behavior, others had a decrease. For instance, the sleep start time decreased for cluster C1 students, whereas it increased for cluster C2 students. So this analysis shows that individuals handle pandemic differently. Even within a homogeneous population of undergraduate students belonging to a single institution, there are subgroups of students with differing changes in mental health and behaviors. So far, we looked at behavioral changes because of COVID and how we have subgroups of students who reacted to pandemic differently. Our focus moving forward will be the COVID-1 question. That is, how concerned are you about COVID-19? Given the significance of COVID, we're interested in learning if COVID concern is associated with mental health and whether we can use passive assessment to monitor and predict COVID concern of participants. This is a plot of the COVID concern responses we received from our participants since March 2020. The second plot is taken off of New York Times and shows the national averages in number of COVID cases. We can see similarities in both the plots, especially around February and March 2021. Both the COVID concern among our students as well as the national number of COVID cases peak around the same time, and then there's a downward trend for a while until both the graphs increase following July 2021. When we perform correlation analysis, we find that COVID concern of students is moderately correlated with their stress, anxiety, and depression. So this begs the question, can we predict COVID concern of students through passive behavioral sensing derived from their smartphones? We experiment with different methods to find the best predictive model for COVID concern. So the COVID concern was assessed every week, although not everyone answered it all at the same time, all the time, since it was optional. So we median splitted the participants' responses in order to create two classes, high COVID concern and low COVID concern. So note that we treated the problem as a time series classification task. We evaluate the prediction performance of different deep learning models by applying 60-20-20 split, and we train the predictive model with the best hyperparameter using all the training data and test on the testing set. Hyperparameters are tuned manually. Overall, the CNN outperforms all the other models. We obtain an AUC of 0.70 and F1 score of 0.71. Finally, we use permutative feature importance approach in order to identify top features. Unique locations visited, duration spent at home, running duration are the top 3 important features for our model. So application-wise, we believe our findings pave the way for further research to investigate how pandemics impact the mental health of young adults at colleges. Importantly, we are now in the second year of the COVID-19 pandemic, and while many students are hopeful that their lives will eventually return to normal in the near future, it looks like we may be living with the pandemic and its variants for some time to come. In fact, we have little visibility of the end of the pandemic with any certainty. As a result, we believe that the insights from our work on finding connections between phones and human behaviors associated with the pandemic remains very relevant going forward. For example, by profiling participants, we're able to address gaps in our understanding of how subgroups of specific populations may respond to traumatic events differently. Also, we envision our predictive model as an early detection system that could provide individualized suggestions to help people navigate difficult times. Thank you for listening.